How I maximize my bicep growth using anatomy, exercise selection, and biomechanics to maximize their growth potential with only 2 years of training experience. Let's jump straight into it. Hey everyone, my name is Pat, but I go by Minimalist Bodybuilding, and today I'll be explaining everything that I've learned about bicep training and specifically how to bias different parts of the biceps to maximize their growth so that they can become as big as possible. With this being said, we'll be taking a close look into the short head, the long head, and the brachialis and figuring out how to bias all three of those parts of the biceps. With this, I will be explaining how you can bias these parts of your biceps using different techniques and exercise selection to maximize their growth potential. And the reason why you'd like to do this is so you can maximize all three parts of your biceps so no part is lacking, leaving out on potential arm size. If you'd like to see different parts of the biceps and learn how to bias those parts specifically, I will be putting in a timeline in the link in the description, and it should be popping up in the video so you can just skip ahead to the parts of the biceps that you are most interested in learning about. But before I jump straight into talking about the biceps and what I've learned and the exercises that I would use, I'd like to give a brief story about my history with my biceps and specifically arm training in general. Now, when I first started lifting approximately 2 years ago, it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. I was torso dominant because of my arms being so much longer than they should have been with my given height. And I'm currently 5'8", which is why it's not really the most optimal. So growing up, my chest was always overdeveloped compared to my arms, specifically my triceps and biceps combined. Now, when it came to growing my biceps, doing standard bicep curls and just programming different bicep variations randomly, that didn't help me. I still didn't see any growth, and I thought that I just maybe could never get big biceps. But I decided to start taking my training seriously and learn different ways on how I can bias different parts of my biceps to maximize their growth. With this being said, I used proper exercise selection and programmed the movements that I needed while also increasing my volume to see the growth that I have. And what I can tell you is those compound movements that everyone tells you that will grow your body equally do not grow your body equally. The reason for this is because those bigger muscles, the main movers, are the ones that take over during those movements. Now, while smaller muscles, for example the bench press with the triceps, they still get worked, but not to the degree that they should be. Now, because of this, you would want to program tricep bias exercises or tricep isolation movements. Now, with this being said, the same thing applies for the biceps. Pull-ups, although they will help you grow your biceps to a certain degree, they are not the only thing you should be doing. You want to also implement bicep isolation movements if you want to see growth in that area. To cut a long story short, after doing this, my biceps grew by about 2 inches, and I was really surprised by the results. And keep in mind that I have been lifting for approximately 2 years, I believe a little less than then. So for me, it was a big shocker, and I'm pretty satisfied with where I am right now. But obviously, I want to keep growing and eventually reach my natty potential. So now let's get into how to bias the long head, specifically this part of the bicep, also known as the peak of the bicep. Now, for barbell curl variations, you want to go with a wider than usual grip. Normally 1.5 times shoulder width apart, I find works the best. The reason for this is it adds an increased stretch to the long head area of the biceps, allowing you to have a better contraction at the top of the movement. Now, my second piece of advice that I would recommend is pretty unusual, but it works 100% because of the way that your body is structured. Now, it's very hard to explain how this works and why this works, but if you'd like to look into it, then I'd recommend searching it up with your own time. Now, what I'm talking about specifically is doing variations where your elbows are behind your body, such as the incline dumbbell curl, where you're laying back on an incline and your elbows are going behind your torso and you're curling up. Now, what this magical way of positioning your body does, it puts more emphasis on your long head, which can be very useful for growing and increasing the peak of your bicep. To summarize, on any barbell variation, you want to go with a wider grip. On any dumbbell variation, you want to have your elbows behind your torso. Now, with that being said, let's go into how to bias the short head of the bicep, or the thicker, meatier part, When it comes to barbell variations for the short head of the biceps, I recommend going with a closer grip, specifically somewhere in the 1 time shoulder width apart area, so anywhere from here to here, anywhere in this general zone. The reason for this is because it does the opposite effect of what the wide grip did for your long head, and instead it adds a stretch on the short head, allowing you to have a better contraction at the top of the movement, which helps bias the short head. Now when it comes to bicep versions, unfortunately there's nothing similar to having the torsos behind the body to bias the short head of the bicep, but what you can do instead is at the top range of the movement with dumbbells, you can add a slight twist that allow your thumbs to go outwards, which adds a better contraction at the top of the range of motion for the short head of the bicep. To summarize, use any barbell variation that allows for a closer than normal grip, and for any dumbbell variation, ensure to add a twist of the wrist near the top end of the motion. After learning about the main components of the biceps, we have to talk about another part of them that you need to hit if you want to truly maximize your biceps, and that is the brachialis. Located underneath the bicep, and it's very hard to see in this form. It can come out at times when a person has a pump, specifically from a side view, and is lean enough, but typically because of the fact that it is under the biceps, it is pretty hard to see. Now the reason you want to bias this variation is because it'll help push your biceps out towards your skin, giving you a bigger appearance. And because of the fact that this part of the biceps is often neglected, when people start working this out, it increases their bicep size drastically because of the newbie gains that kick in. Now to bias this variation, the only thing you can do is use any exercise with a neutral grip. So hammer curls with a neutral grip, use the specialty barbell with a neutral grip for the biceps, or use any exercise on cables that allows for a neutral grip, my personal preference being the rope bicep curl. Now let's talk about volume work for the biceps, because now that you know how to work them, it is best to figure out how you should program them efficiently to maximize your muscle gains. I recommend programming 3 bicep exercises per week, specifically in the 3 to 5 set range. And when it comes to rep range, anywhere from 8 to 20 reps is highly recommended. I prefer doing days where I have 8 to 12 and other days where I go all the way up to 15. I'm not a huge fan of going to 20, but it is also a possibility if you're finding that your biceps are lacking or are dealing with any joint issues. Now when it comes to reps in reserve or RPE, for the biceps, I recommend going at an RPE of 8 or 9 and a reps in reserve of 2 to 3. Now you can also go at failure or very close to failure, but I would not recommend doing that unless it is at the last set of an exercise. But what I do recommend doing is, if you do consider doing that, I recommend adding partials of the movement and go past failure for that extra stimulus. Drop a comment down below if you have any suggestions on how to improve bicep training or arm training in general. And if you enjoyed the video or would like to tell me on anything that you'd feel like I could improve on, all criticisms and critiques are appreciated. As always, a like and a subscription is always appreciated, as I'd like to push out more content so that more people can learn from my experiences. There's also a link in my bio where you can get access to the free resources that I offer, such as the programs I offer, playlists I offer for music, and other stuff, including my other socials. Or contact me, coaching, inquiries, etc. Now, if you'd be interested in any of those, feel free to go check it out and see what you like. Once again, thank you.